I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor of Gold Derby, here with composer Harry Gregson-Williams, acclaimed composer whose latest work is the original score to Disney's live-action Mulan. Harry, I'm sure you're asked this all the time about how the original was so popular and so well known, and you then had the challenge of bringing life to the live-action remake. Talk us through your process and what were you originally thinking about when conceptualizing the score for the live-action remake?
Well, first of all, I was really happy to be asked to do this. I, like a lot of people, loved the original movie, and I was a great admirer of Jerry Goldsmith's score. Treading in those big old footprints was an honor and a thrill, really. You know, it was also quite intimidating. But having worked with Niki Caro once before, the director, we did this little movie, The Zookeeper's Wife, and we had a really good time on that and really connected. So I was so happy when she asked me, when I actually saw her little face on the front of Variety saying, this person's being announced as the director of Mulan. And I thought, oh, good. Well, we've just done The Zookeeper's Wife. Let's hope she calls me. And indeed she did. So yes, I had to actually ban the original movie in my household. I've got quite a few children, and I've got children of the age who would maybe want to be watching the original Mulan. I had to put that out of my mind. So this isn't so much a remake, but a reimagining. And therefore, I wasn't going to use Jerry Goldsmith's score, which I had admired. Early on, conceptually, you know, Niki had made it clear that she'd like a score in the vein of some of, you know, Narnia or something like this, a big sweeping, quite romantic score in some places, but it was going to be an action film, so it's going to be plenty of action writing. So that was good news. You know, I like me a bit of action. So I started writing themes for this really early on, sending them to Niki, who was far away. I don't think she was in China. She was in New Zealand, I think, for a lot of the shoot. And by the time she hit post-production, and I got going for real, you know, I had Mulan's theme under my belt, just at the piano, you know, and I had her come down to my studio in Santa Monica here in Los Angeles. And, you know, as a composer, that's really the acid test is kind of feeling the room. When you sit at the piano and play something, you gotta, you know, if she recoils in horror, you know, you're not on the right path. But she kind of bounced up and down on the sofa and said, Harry, I love this, I love this, I love this. How is it really going to sound though? Because clearly it's not going to be piano. So I said, well, you know, give me a few days. I'm so happy you like it. So what I did was take that, and I went to a couple of the key moments of the film and started to orchestrate and arrange this theme, which initially was a sort of lilting rhythm in 3, not a march as in 4/4. It was in 3, not like a waltz, but quite a lilting, a little bit plaintive to begin with, and playful. Because when we first meet Mulan, of course, she's not the warrior she's gonna be. She's a young girl who's a kind of, yeah, she's been kind of naughty. She's running around on rooftops and stuff like that. So she hasn't really discovered her real self yet. So I was able to play her theme right from the beginning of the movie, but on a Chinese flute with some very lush strings behind it. By the time we get to her jumping around on a battlefield, this theme had to have developed into something, yes, in 4/4, and very much a heroic sort of thing that was accompanied with French horns and a big symphony orchestra and massed choirs. So, you know, I had to know starting out that the tune that I was putting over the little girl was going to have to be able to be developed into something more rambunctious later in the movie. So that's really where I set sail. And once I'd had a couple of these key moments nailed, you know, we went over to, I think the Body Khan, over to his character, and thought, well, how can we play the darkness here? So I try to avoid like low brass and anything low, actually. I didn't really go for that. Quite often that is a kind of key to your bad guy. Let's get downstairs, as it were. But on this occasion, it was more trying to pepper him with the flavors of the North, as it were, the northern invaders coming from the north of China. And I used a variety of Chinese instruments, and actually a duduk in one place, which is not Chinese. There is a Chinese duduk, though, although one usually associates it with Armenia or something like that. And I think the witch was the next character, which I tackled with we found that the Chinese violin, the erhu, which has only got 3 strings and looks very difficult to play because of that. As a youngster, in my youth, I played the violin, so I'm quite well versed in an instrument that uses a bow, as the erhu does. But this guy is there's no frets on it, and it looks really tricky to play. So I had a theme I thought would be really fitting for the witch, and I had to send it to over to some people who were testing these things out on Chinese instruments for me, and had a wonderful erhu player called Yvonne Wu play my theme for me, and I instantly realized I had to transpose it down a couple of tones so that it really fit the instrument. But that became her identity, really. And all the way through this process, it was a question of writing music that worked with the picture first and foremost, and then I would see, with Niki's help, with the director's help, how I could smatter Chinese flavors amongst it, and that it was that way around, rather than me writing specifically for a Chinese instrument and thinking, how can I make this work dramatically with the film? Niki had actually suggested that, because right at the beginning of the process, I'd said, you know, I have no Chinese in me. There's no descent in the Gregson-Williams Chinese descent. However, I've been down this path a couple of times. I was reminded actually by a friend that there was quite a big portion of a film called Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt that was in China, and I had actually had to research Chinese instruments at that stage. So I wasn't a complete novice at this, but you know, Niki encouraged me to write a very Harry score. That's how she put it. You know, to write the music that came to me naturally and dramatically, and then for us to see how we could thread Chinese instruments through it to give it the right sort of feel and flavor. So that's really how we did it.
You know, I'm really glad you said that, because when you're going into a movie that's set in Asia, I always think, oh, I hope the score is not going to be, you know, what you usually might expect. Like someone trying to do another version of John Williams' Memoirs of the Geisha or something.
Oh, goodness gracious. Come on.
Can you imagine?
I might have Williams in my last name. That's enough. I don't need to be aping the great man.
Exactly.
No,
but you didn't
right.
do that.
No, it's not possible to do that. You know, thankfully he's still with us, and he's still writing the music that he does, and long may that last. So yeah, that wasn't my task, and thankfully I didn't have a director who was saying, you know what, if I could, I'd have John Williams, not Harry Gregson-Williams. No, Niki was like, come on, Harry, give me what you have. I want what you do. But it was very much a question of using the time I was given. Now, you might, last time we spoke, I can't remember, what was on Catch-22, wasn't it, with George Clooney? Yeah. We had a very small amount of time to do that. You know, you can have to rush through things, and that's part of being a composer, and it's part of the kick, actually. It's quite fun. But on this one, I cleared the decks, you might say. I left myself enough time. No, I really did, and actually Disney played into my hands, because post-production seemed to go on for a long time. So it gave me the opportunity to be able to experiment with how we wanted this thing to sound. And the only thing that we didn't control, which I wish we had, was the fact that people never saw this in a theater. But you know, what can you do? We're not the only ones. You know, my friend Hans Zimmer was on the phone to me yesterday, bemoaning the fact that 1 or 2 of his movies are going that way, and so that's just the way it is. But you know, hopefully we try to make an epic, dynamic score, and I just hope people will choose a TV over an iPhone to hear it. We did mix it. We did mix it that way. You know, that was our intention. But you know, joking aside, we were really lucky with the timing of the pandemic, because well, if one can be lucky with such a thing, we were lucky because, hey, I got to take 4 of my 5 children to the world premiere in Los Angeles, and we did hear it in the theater. We did get to enjoy that. About 3 days later, we were told it was a lockdown thing, and the whole thing was called off. But so yeah, you know, I'm glad that we went down that path, though. I can't imagine us making it for another medium. You know, it was Niki's vision was big, and it did have scope, and the music needed to have that same scope. So, you know what? I've never been asked to write music for an iPhone, so I don't. I hope I never will be. Actually, I should have said that. I'm on an iPhone right now, so I've got nothing against them. But you know, it is with the score. What the intention was to make it as lush and epic as possible. And although you could say it's kind of an action film, I hope at the heart of it is the emotional arc that I was able to give. You know, to give Mulan, because there was a great canvas there, because she, you know, we see her as a little girl fooling about in the village, and then we see her, you know, saving everybody's bacon at the end. So that's a nice trip to go on musically.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I'm describing this score to people who are not aware of it yet, I generally like to call this one, I mean, it's got a great balance between action, mystical, Chinese, and romance, and the melodic parts. But I actually find the score really uplifting and quite moving. And I'm wondering if there's a particular track that you see as a highlight of your work on this. I have a track, I think Desert Garrison towards the beginning of the film, because I love the use of drum.
How very masculine of you. Yes.
I know, right? Oh, what a surprise.
Yeah, no, that track is full of drums, and it's
so good though.
I don't know. I think maybe my favorite cue to write in the movie was the final cue, because although the first, and often as a composer, one's dealing with, you know, a 40-second cue here or a 2-minute cue here, and that's fine. But when you get a chunky bit there, and the whole movie's resolution everything comes together there, I was able to play a theme I haven't mentioned, I didn't mention early on, which was a theme, it was a very important theme, which I wrote for the connection between Mulan and her dad. So when she does eventually come back to the village and her dad forgives her, there's quite a lot of dialogue there. So the music had to support that rather than poke its head above the parapet too much. But eventually the music takes over, and off we go. It was really pleasurable to be able to bring that theme, the mother and the father and daughter theme, Mulan's theme, together, and have them work in the same sort of environment. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's really actually quite appropriate for Niki to call this a Harry score, because if you look at your credits and you've worked on, you know, animation, you've done quite a bit of sci-fi, and you're Narnia, which is probably maybe the closest to the action sequences, perhaps maybe. What do you find the most difficult genre to score, or are you just genre non-specific and fluid?
Well, no, I usually, you know, it's the score that I'm working on now. I'm working on a Ridley Scott score at the moment, and that's really the most difficult thing I've ever done. Yeah, but I think when I was doing Mulan, I found it the most pleasurable and the most difficult all at once. I think that's really where it's at as a composer. You know, one loves the challenge. It's terrifying and thrilling all at once, and it's quite a responsibility. Let's forget that. You know, this Mulan doesn't come out of nowhere. There's a history there, not only about the original movie, but, you know, Disney had made Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King 2, and they've been, you know, they have these properties, and you know, you've got the big boys, Hans Zimmer and people like that scoring the other movies. You know, there was a certain amount of pressure there for me to perform and do my best. But as I told you, the process was made pleasurable by the fact that Niki was very supportive from the word go. And I knew that she was, you know, she was wanting something from me that I could give her. And that might sound a little odd, but sometimes one finds oneself in a position where, you know, what one's doing isn't quite right and never feels quite right. And one has to ask oneself, why isn't Thomas Newman doing this? Why am I doing this? I have asked myself that question a few times before. But not on this one, I have to say. On Mulan, yeah, Niki made me feel very wanted and needed, and was very clear that music was going to play a big part in this one.
Yeah, and unlike some of the other live action remakes, this one has nothing really to do with the animated feature. It does have a beautiful song at the end, by the way, that's played over the really gorgeous credits, which are animated. Does that give you some satisfaction that you've just been able to make something really new and different and balanced and and rich and illustrious, and something that you can kind of look back on in years to come and say, oh, you know, that was one of the highlights of my career.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. It's you know, it would be a huge mistake for anybody who would agree with me. Any creative person would agree with me that it'd be a huge mistake to sit on one's laurels and think, well, that was great. No, I mean, I'm very self-critical, and I'm sure that I know there are things I could have done better. But what I do know is that there was enough time. The director gave me the space to be able to experiment, and I didn't miss an opportunity, you know, for me. I did my best for sure. And I hope that that's good enough. That's all. That's all what else could I say?
That's all you can really say. Harry, really thank you for your time today. You've been cited by the BAFTAs, the Grammys and the Globes. I'm hoping that this is the one that gets you to the Oscars, but let's just wait and see.
Well, thank you very much.